In the know, non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Purple Daily, Vikings Vent Line, every Sunday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feed. What's going on, everyone? Declan Goff here to take you through another off-season edition where my guys Nick and Joe are about to join us to talk a little preseason. We'll talk expectations for the upcoming season. And if you, the listener, the watcher, would like to be on this show, hit me up. It's VikingsVentLine@gmail.com. We're recording this a little early, but we're a month away from the season starting in week 1 against Tampa Bay at home in Minneapolis at US Bank Stadium. So we got another about a month's worth of Vikings Vent Line off-season editions to get through. So if you'd like to join one of those shows, hit me up. It's VikingsVentLine@gmail.com. Once the season gets going, Mackie, Judd, myself will welcome a ton of Vikings fans on the show right after week 1 ends and at US Bank Stadium against the Bucs to bring you on here, talk about the game. It's one of the most fan-friendly and most fun shows out there. It's Vikings Vent Line, so we're jacked that we're already less than a month out from doing that again. So if you want to be on a future episode, hit me up. It's VikingsVentLine@gmail.com. Also, shout out to our friends at TCL. The football season around the corner. Go get yourself a TCL television. Enjoy more of what you love with TCL. And also hit the subscribe button for daily Minnesota Vikings entertainment right here on this YouTube channel. Give us a 5-star review. We're nearing 1,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts. More reviews means more people discover the show. So please, if you're ever so kind, leave us a review, hit a like button, hit a subscribe button, and tell a few friends about Purple Daily, which is daily Vikings entertainment. All right, let's get our guys on here. Let's get Nick. Let's get Joe on. Nick, you are calling from your car. You said you are in, and forgive me, you said Virginia?
Yes, Virginia.
Okay, and Joe, where are you calling from, my man?
Calling from just outside of Toronto, up here in Canada. So
okay.
45 minutes to Buffalo, but yeah, big Vikings fan.
Nice. Did you make it to the Bills game last year?
No. I've seen them in Detroit a few times and Chicago, so we're kind of in a good pocket. They come up this way a couple times a year.
Nice, man. Good to hear. Nick was telling me off mic because he's from Virginia, and I like to, just like I did with Joe there, I like to figure out where everyone's from, figure out their lineage as a Vikings fan. And Nick maybe told me one of the most absurd stories of how he became a Vikings fan. So, Nick, I'm going to give you the floor here. When did you first become a Vikings fan, and what happened on Christmas as a young boy that made you a Vikings fan?
Yeah, so in '98 was when I really started to catch on to football, and the Vikings were obviously really good. Drafted some guy named Randy Moss. We didn't hear much from him, but so on Christmas, my mother, a wonderful human being, got me a Gary Anderson jersey. It's the cheapest jersey you can buy, and my man went on to just blow the biggest disaster game I've ever seen on television. I never wore that jersey again, ever.
Man, that is rough. And like a cruel, is your mom like a pseudo Packers or Falcons fan? Like what happened there?
So, I mean, my family is from Michigan. My grandpa's a Lions fan. So I guess so. But yeah, I know. So I'm the reason why we're cursed. So I do apologize to all the Vikings fans.
Man, that is a great story. Great story. If you ever see Nick down in Virginia and you are cheersing Before I Die, or you're watching the Vikings, let him tell you that story, because that's heartbreaking right there. That is some heartbreaking stuff, my friend. It's too bad.
Yeah.
All right, boys, let's get into Vikings Vent Line here. I want to start you guys off with this one. So Kirk Cousins is entering the last year of his contract. I'd like to know, just straight up, I'll answer this as kind of black and white. Should the Vikings actually extend Kirk Cousins? Should they just take care of this thing now instead of letting the season play out? Maybe he prices himself out because he balls out in 2023. So, Nick, should the Vikings extend Kirk Cousins before the season starts? Yes or no?
So the way I have to look at it, I'm the biggest stan for Kirk Cousins and the biggest hater at the very same time. I'd say don't extend him. He's got to prove it at this point. I mean, there's no reason for us to just be like, yeah, we go to the playoffs and we'll win some divisions. That's just not enough for me anymore. I really want a championship for Minnesota. And if he gets us there this year, pay him all the money in the world. But if not, it's just something we have to revisit.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for them. I don't think they'll extend him before it happens, but they're betting on, or Kirk's betting on himself a little bit here, and we'll see with his age and the year he has if he ends up pricing himself out, and if the Vikings want to enter that unknown territory, which they are usually in, but pre-Kirk Cousins, of what they want to do at the most important position in sports. But it is an interesting decision that they want to do. I don't think Cousins camp is pushing for it behind the scenes anymore. I think they're going to let this play out, but it could be a big surprise, obviously, before the season starts. Joe, how about you, man? Should the Vikings extend Kirk Cousins before the season starts?
I'm with Nick. I've got a love-hate thing with Kirk Cousins. I think every Vikings fan does, but I think I would extend him. Obvious caveat is contract term. He's going to be 35 starting next year, I think. So if you can get him on another 2-year extension, I'm fine with it. And I think a lot of it's just lack of anyone else in the system. I have no confidence in Nick Mullins. Hall, way too young at this point. So if you don't, you're going to kind of be scrounging the free agency bin. And I don't think we want to do that with Justin Jefferson going into his prime. I think you're going to waste a couple of years of him. So you know what you got with Kirk. He's kind of your tier 2, tier 3, slightly above average guy, right? So I think you can win with him. You gotta really improve the defense. You got to get a better interior O-line, keep them upright, keep them healthy, all that stuff. So I think with lack of better options, you keep them for a couple of years, take a few runs, and hopefully you can find a gem somewhere in the draft and develop them. Because I don't think we're going to get a high pick, and I don't think we're getting a great free agent in the next couple of years. So for lack of better options, I think you got to roll with them for a few years.
You bring up the Justin Jefferson part, that if they indeed extend him, and if you're JJ's camp too, they probably want to know what the long-term plan is with Kirk. Now, I think when you give someone like Justin Jefferson life-changing money, I would be pretty surprised if someone of that age and that stature just says no to that without this caveat of the quarterback position. But it's a big one for him. I mean, he doesn't want to enter uncertainty with some backup, to your point, like Nick Mullins, if that was the case, or if they sign some guy off the street in free agency that's kind of like tier 3, tier 4 quarterback. You certainly don't want that as well if you're Justin Jefferson, which also is like just an interesting domino here. I mean, do you guys think also in the same vein, but with JJ, Nick, do you see a deal getting done for Justin Jefferson before the season starts?
I would like to think so. I don't think it's a huge problem. I think the only thing is injury is the only thing that concerns me. Is if we pay him all this money and God forbid something happens this year, I could see why they don't extend him, but I am team pay that man all the money in the world. And that's why I'm still leaning on Kirk Cousins, because if you can't get us to a championship, I'd rather, stick with Jaron Hall, draft, if we can't get Drake May or Caleb Williams, you have the Michigan quarterback, you have, I'm not high on Bo Nix, but, I'd rather try to give the keys to the kid. If we build up a Ferrari for him, he can go fast. So, I'm definitely team pay JJ all the money. If Kirk takes us to at least the NFC championship, I would say, keep him. But JJ wants to win a championship. And with the way the NFL is nowadays, a lot of these teams are just giving the keys to these kids and like just building it up and getting them all the defense on all the superstars and letting them get to, the championships.
Yeah, they got to pay the superstar and they got to keep him happy. It's kind of like, with Danielle Hunter, they basically just admitted, all right, we'll give you a bunch of money this year and we might have to say goodbye next year, but they definitely could not have gone into this season and with him holding out to a degree without paying him and finding a resolution there, except Danielle Hunter's not on this team. Well, that defense looks a lot different. The Vikings as a whole are going to be a worse team. They obviously had to just pay the guy. But with JJ, he is such a game-changing wide receiver in a sport that I think has more talented wide receivers than we've seen in a long time too. So I do think you can find really good wide receivers, but clearly JJ's, I mean, he's probably the best receiver in the NFL. So you got to keep that guy happy, and having Kirk throw the football to him will obviously be pretty ideal as well. On the preseason front, so the Vikings' first preseason game took place on Thursday night against the Seattle Seahawks. Joe, which Vikings player has the most to prove this preseason?
I think you could probably make a case for half of that 2022 draft, the first few for sure. Yeah. Booth, Cine, Ingram, all of them have now lived up to expectations. But I think for me, Lewis Cine's probably the biggest one. looked pretty bad in the first preseason game. I was kind of giving him a pass. He got injured, obviously, a couple games into last season, but I had high hopes for him coming out of Georgia. He was on, a top historic defense, right? And you passed over somebody like Kyle Hamilton, who's probably going to be compared to for a while, whether that's fair or not. But you put a lot of high draft capital towards those guys, and they've not really done a thing. I think you're going to get bailed out a little bit with, Mekhi Blackman being a third rounder this year, stepping in right away. But if you kind of bust on first, second round picks in, Kwesi's first draft, it's not going to look great. So I don't think you need him to be great or elite at all in the safety room. It's pretty deep there, but he's got to be on the field a little bit. He's got to stay healthy, and he's got to be, he's got to contribute at least a bit. He can't be a nobody, and he can't be, getting pushed out by guys that are way lower drafted for him. So I'm hoping he turns it around, but I'm not, after last night, I'm not super confident, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been a rough go of it for him, and I know that people wanted to give him a pass with the injury, rightfully so. But the fact he in OTAs, minicamp, and now we're about halfway through training camp, the fact he really is clearly solidified as a backup is not a great sign. And yeah, that draft class in general, between Lewis Cine not hitting the ceiling, Booth having injuries. I mean, Ed Ingram got a lot of runs, so that's not a great sign either that he's indeed locked in to be a starter again, or at least not have some competition that could be brought in externally behind him. That draft class looks rough. I guess you can look at it both sides. If it's a bad draft class, but the Vikings aren't, destroyed or derailed because of that bad draft class, and that's going to happen to a degree. But yeah, you'd like to see a first-year general manager obviously find some diamonds in the rough or hit on the picks he's supposed to in one of those two situations. And unfortunately for Kwesi in that first draft class, it's obviously teetering towards bust territory. Nick, how about you, though? When you look at this preseason, you see these rookies, you see these second-year players that are trying to prove some things. Who do you want to see prove the most in preseason for the Vikings?
So my dyslexic self, I actually misread the question. But so I actually wrote down three, and just three quick reasons. One is actually Lewis Cine. I'm actually the complete opposite of you guys. I'm not worried about him. I'm a big fan of, if we don't need him to step in right now, don't play him. And coming off the injury, last night I just saw a kid that was a little bit too excited to play football. And I think he was just, trying to get the right steps. But, why would you ever try to tackle a guy like that? So I think it's just, part of it is him being too excited. The second one is Ivan Pace. I've been team Ivan Pace gang. I do a bunch of mock drafts, and I always wanted to see where Pace would fall because I thought he fit perfect. And then the other guy is Andrew Booth. I don't even know, because it's not injury at this point. It's just, is he not studying? Everything I saw, he's just out of place. So that just tells me he's just not attacking it. And, I don't think you could blame Kwesi or anything like that, because the hope is you can come in, read the playbook and play. But he just looked lost all night long. And like you said, they didn't even bring him in until the third or fourth quarter. That's a terrible sign. So with Lewis Cine, I'm a little, I'm not on that train yet. I just see a kid excited to play football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he was itching to get out there. He hadn't been out in a real game since the London injury, so I completely understand that. And yeah, there's time. It's kind of nice that he's not being asked to be the starting safety. Like, to your point, Harrison Smith's going to be here another year. Cam Bynum's capable. Josh Metellus is this freak hybrid that can play almost all these weird positions. And can Lewis Cine still study it a little bit and then maybe get after it and is maybe an impact player during the season at some point due to injury, or maybe by next year he shows enough development behind the scenes and on the football field that he can kind of crack that roster and unfortunately prove a lot of people wrong, that he's not a draft bust and he can actually step in and be a very capable player like he was at Georgia, like Joe was talking about, where he was a really good player and one of the highest regarded defensive players on a really good defense for the Bulldogs as well. But you'd like to see Lewis Cine obviously develop, and hopefully he's not a bust for Kwesi's sake either. On that defensive side, Joe, do you trust that this Vikings defense under Brian Flores has made these necessary tweaks to improve? I mean, it's been one of the worst defenses in the NFL the last 3 years. Do you finally see this Vikings defense trending up in the right direction in 2023?
Can't get any worse, right? It's there's nowhere to go but up. I think from looking at last year's team, we were second last in yards per game, only in front of kind of an embarrassing Lions defense, right? So I really think Flores obviously is going to turn things around. I hope he does, but I think it's going to take some time. I think we got to be patient. Schedule's not kind to us either. We got Eagles, Chargers, Chiefs all in the first 5 or 6 weeks, so it's going to be tough. We lost some good players, obviously. Z Smith, Pat Peterson, Shelley Island, some of these guys that were contributing, that were vets too, right? So they've been replaced. Obviously, a lot of them are young guys, but we got to see a step forward probably from some of the 2022 draft class. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I think we're going to be quicker, which is nice. We were so slow last year. And I think just moving away from the soft, shell defense that Donatel ran should immediately probably have some dividends. But I don't see us being a great defense. I think just to move up into the top 20, he's going to have to be good enough, right? You try and be a top 5 offense and an average defense and hope that does it for you. But I'm excited. It's going to be very improved, and we'll see some creative, aggressive defense for once instead of just sitting back and getting picked apart for a whole game. So
yeah, it feels like the speed is definitely going to catch up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, between Pat P, Eric Kendricks, good players, Hall of very good players. Some of them who might even be in the Hall of Fame, but they're slow. They're older guys, and now you have an influx of inexperience to a degree, but also speed. And if Brian Flores, who is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL and was a former NFL head coach, is even using this as a launching pad to get a new gig in about 6 to 8 months, if he turns around this Vikings defense, he'll obviously be right there as a contender of getting a new job too. So if he can turn it around, I'm all for it. What about you, Nick? Do you have trust that this Vikings defense is going back in the right direction?
Whew. So I'm actually very, very high on our defense. I think if we stay healthy, I think we're going to be a problem. Because last night, I know we lost by 10 points, but from the early on with these kids that, we picked up this year, and Caleb Evans and Byron Murphy, I see a lot of people in the right places at the right time, especially Ivan Pace. He's not the biggest guy, but every time I looked at him last night, he's in the right place. And that's all you can ask for. The defense last year, I don't think they were slow. I just think it was terrible play calling. I mean, I can call a better game on Madden if you give me a controller. It was horrible, and there was 0 adjustments in game, out of game, bye week. There was no adjustments, and I just think, there's no way you can run a defense like that. So with Brian Flores, I'm actually very high. I think we should be aggressive, like Joe was saying. We're fast, we're young. If these kids can stay in the right place and stay healthy, I think we could crack into the top 15. But if you're just going to sit in a cover 2 zone, it's going to be 31st every time. Anyone who runs that defense is going to be 31st or 32nd every single time.
I love your idea of being a Madden controller and just basically, hey, Donatel, give me the sticks here.
I got it.
Let me call it.
Get Nick on the sideline. Get Nick on the sideline for.
I mean, it was a joke, and every week I was like, okay, maybe he'll fix it. We got to week 14, 15. I was like, what is it? I'm never a guy fire the coach mid-season. I was standing on the table, fire this guy. Like anybody can call a better game, and I'm not trying to be mean to the guy, but it's just, why would you do that? I feel like you wasted a lot of people's time last year running that defense.
Agreed, man. Yeah, I think they probably should have made that call, and unfortunately they didn't, and it probably prevented them from potentially making a run in the NFC playoffs, even if the Niners or Eagles were in their way. Before we wrap here on Vikings Vent Line, Joe, do you have any last takes? Do you have any shout-outs you'd love to give? I don't know if there's a bunch of Vikings fans up there across the border with you that you watch games with, but any shout-outs or last takes? Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, we got a few Vikings fans up here. We're too close to Buffalo. They're mostly Bills fans, but I think my last thoughts, I'm just excited about the season. I think we're going to win the division again. I'm not overly confident in all the hype Detroit's getting. They'll be up there, but I think we take it again, and I'm not really concerned about Chicago or the Packers. I think they'll take big steps back. So excited for the year. I think we're probably at 10-16, 10-17, something like that. But if we can get in, I think we're probably primed to be a more competitive playoff team than we were last year, right? So give a shout out to my dad. He's a huge Steelers fan, but watch a lot of ball with him. And I'll shout out the WFL, my fantasy league, top fantasy league in Canada, I think. So
Nice,
hey to those guys. We watch a lot of the games on Red Zone together. So hey to all you.
Awesome, man. Love it. Nick, you told me off mic before we hit the record button that we robbed you of a touchdown with Danielle Hunter. Do you want to explain yourself there?
So my prediction was that Danielle Hunter would stay healthy and play more than 12 games, and everyone agreed TD. And then when you guys brought it back on the show, they're like, "Yeah, this guy, yeah, we're not. That's a check down." I was like, "What?" No, but I would love to, get back on there. So you guys don't need to add a touchdown, but I just thought it was funny.
Dude, join the club. I feel like I get robbed by touchdowns all the time. Okay, I mean, I have a lot more misses than I do completions, so I feel you that unfortunately sometimes to write that down, gods and not even the gods, the creators, if you will, and Phil Mackey and Judd Zulgad love to then have a little power hungry against you. So join the club, man. Been there, done that. On Write That Down. All right, boys. Appreciate you guys coming on. Great takes, great stuff. And if anyone who's listening, watching this, wants to come on a future episode, hit me up. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com. Hit that subscribe button too for daily Vikings entertainment, where we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.